Hi, everybody. It is Tuesday, September 29th. We'd like to talk a little bit about the Northwest Territory. I turn my computer this way so it's not pointing directly into the window. All right, so yesterday we learned about the Articles of Confederation government, and we know that we didn't want a government that was too strong like England's. So we've created a government that's too weak. Unfortunately, that's not going to work very well. So for the 13 colonies are going to be a lot more like 13 independent countries rather than one unified country. The Confederation Congress tries to run the nation with the Articles of Confederation as our constitution, but it's just not going to work. A lot of things are going to go wrong, and America is going to start to fall apart by 1787. Well, we'll get to that story later in the week about falling apart. But for right now, I would like to talk about a good thing about the Confederation years. There are some things, not many, but a couple things that worked out right, and the Northwest Territory is one of them. Northwest Territory includes this area. You know, the British would not let us move west of the Appalachian Mountains. Now that the British are gone, that restriction is gone as well. So we need an organized way for people to move out to the Northwest Territory and be able to live life. Why is that called our Northwest? Well, it is the northern part of the country, and our western border is the Mississippi River. We don't own anything out here yet, so this is America's Northwest in the late 1700s. Okay, we mentioned we don't want a strong government, try to create a weak government. Unfortunate result is the place is falling apart, but the following is a success of the Confederation years. Today's modern states of Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota are involved in the Northwest Territory. Congress is trying to accomplish creating a way for people to buy land west of the Appalachians and be able to live on it, and then create a way to add new states to the U.S. Those new states will be equal to the original 13. Problem is, well, we're kind of acting like 13 different countries, not one unified country with 13 states. So different states claim to own part of this land out here. They all say, well, Massachusetts says some of it is ours, Connecticut says some of it is theirs, Pennsylvania claims some, Virginia claims all of it. So big mess. So how can Congress solve this? Well, by saying, all right, all of this is going to belong to the United States, not to any individual state. So they pass a law called the Northwest Ordinance. There are actually two of them. What we're talking about right here is mostly concerned with the second. We're going to divide the land up in all those states into little tiny pieces so people can go live on it. So the Northwest Territory includes those 5 states plus Minnesota. Thomas Jefferson proposed some names for some future states out there. Now, a little bit, you'll look at a different map like this, and you'll do your clerky discussion today based on some of the names of those states. Some of them looking kind of normal, and some of them looking kind of goofy. Like, are you even allowed to say that one at school? You might get in trouble. I'm going to show you how they would divide land up. You don't have a Northwest Territory sheet in a hard copy, but you'll get at least an idea of how we're going to divide land up for sale. Now, what we do out there in all that Northwest Territory is they're pretty much going to divide all the land up into boxes. On paper, it's a box. On land, it's a thing called a township. A township has a baseline at the bottom and at the top, a range line on either side. That whole thing is 6 square miles on each side, which means it is how many? Raise your hand if you know. Yes, I see you. Very good. 36 square miles. If it's 6 miles by 6 miles, you can't buy that. That's way too big. Think of maybe Penn Township or Manheim Township or West Manheim Township. Huge area. Except here in the Midwest, they're all going to be nice geometric shapes. So if you take each individual box, we're going to start to break this down into something you could actually buy. Each individual box is called a section, which is 1 square mile. Still too much for you to buy, so let's divide that down a little more. All of those sections in the township are numbered. Section number 16 has a special purpose. When they sell the land in section 16, that land is going to go for public education. Our Congress understood early on that for American democracy to work, people had to be educated. You have to be able to read and write. You have to be able to make up your own mind about issues or politicians or who to vote for. And so Section 16 isn't necessarily where the schools are going to be. The schools are going to be in all the different sections. But selling land in Section 16 is going to pay for those schools. Here's a few examples of big name universities that you might have heard of that were started with Section 16 money. Okay, so let's divide a section down into its smaller pieces so you know what you could actually buy. One section is 640 acres, much too big for anyone to buy. You wouldn't be able to afford it. Land companies buy this from the government at auction, and then they'll divide it up into smaller pieces for individual families to buy. So 640 acres in one section is just much too big. You could buy half of a section, 320 acres, which is called a half section. That's still too much for most people. You could possibly buy a quarter section, which is 160 acres, but that's still too much for most families to be able to buy or afford. You could buy a half quarter section, and you're going to say, wait, if we have a full section, a half section, a quarter section, why isn't this called an eighth of a section? It's not my fault. It's government work, so making sense is not a requirement. It's called a half quarter. Still too big, though, for most people to buy and be able to farm. You know, you're using a one-blade plow pulled by a mule or an ox or maybe a horse. That's way too much for people to work in those days. So you could buy one smaller piece, divide a half quarter in half, and you have a quarter section. Now we're talking. Now this is what most people could actually buy, clear the land, clear the trees, build a home, start to build a life, plant crops. 40 acres is something that people could handle in those days. So a quarter section is the smallest size they're allowed to sell, and for most people, that's pretty appropriate. Now, at school, if you were here with us, we would go to see about what 1 acre is. It's kind of hard for us to understand an acre in ground, but pretty much 1 acre is about the size of a football field. Maybe the area inside the red would be about an acre. Also, if you can imagine the Southwestern football field plus the track and all the area inside the stadium, there's probably about 2 acres. So that kind of gives you an idea. What we're doing at school is we are going to go out for a walk. We're going to walk off pretty much a 40-acre piece of property. So if we were starting at our end of the building, we go out and up to the hill where the power line is. We'll walk along the telephone poles. Don't worry, cross-country kids, you don't have to run it. We would go down by the varsity baseball field. If we were to go the whole way down to that old softball field, walk across the back of the hidden pond, over to the high school, kind of touch the high school building, come back along the Mustang tree, through the high school parking lot, and back to the hill at the south end of Embry-Markle building, that would be about 40 acres. That's about the size of the piece of land many people are going to buy in the Northwest. So now that you've seen what 40 acres looks like, is this law popular? Do people move out there and buy this land? Absolutely. This is very, very popular. Hundreds of thousands of people will leave the East Coast, move to the Northwest Territory, and start to populate it, clear the land, plant farms. And for America, it's kind of always our thing to be constantly moving west, constant motion. We're not satisfied to be in one place, and we're always moving. And maybe some of us are still like that. How many of you have moved at least at one time in your life? You've moved from one house to another, one state to another, one town to another. That's kind of how the American way is. So there are also some requirements for becoming a new state. Once we've got a lot of land, of course, in the Northwest, people will start moving there, but they want to be a state just like they were at the previous residence. So once there are 60,000 residents in a new potential state, 5,000 of them have to be eligible voters, which means you have to be male, white, free, land owning, and over age 21. So you got to be 5 things to vote in those days, which is none of you. I would be the only one, I guess, who's eligible to vote at that standard. The new state has to be approved by Congress. They have to provide for public schools and no slavery. We'll start to get more and more into the slavery issue, but right now, no slavery is going to be allowed in the Northwest Territory. Northerners see that as a big move forward. Southerners, well, slavery doesn't really work up there anyway, but they're not real happy about it. All that to say, my grandparents owned a farm in Piatt County, Illinois. And kind of an interesting thing is if you go out to the Midwest, if you fly over it, you'll be able to see that grid pattern on the ground. Get an airplane, fly to California, and look out the window over the Midwest, and you'll see that grid pattern because today's roads pretty much follow the 1780s grid. Now, my grandparents' farm was here in central Illinois in between a little town called Mahomet and Farmer City. You zoom in on it a little bit. My grandparents' farm was this one, which you can kind of see the road lines there that mark off their quarter section. The farmhouse and buildings and things are here. All the fields here. There's a pond here because when they built the interstate through the farm, they had to build up the ground to build a bridge on. So our family's farm was really no longer profitable. There just wasn't enough land once the government built the interstate through it. But that's another story for another day. And that kind of gives us an idea of what the Northwest Territory is like. Oops, going the wrong way. That is the farmhouse that my grandparents lived in, and my mom lived in, and I lived in for a short time. All right, so the Northwest Territory, to summarize, is a way of dividing up land for people to go live in, and also provides a way for new states to start joining the Union. So that's where we're headed today to learn a little bit about that. And be sure when you do your LEQ at the end of the lesson, you're answering it well, complete sentences, at least 20 words. Show me you've learned something today. And you want to be sure not to copy from someone else's website. All right, very good. Thanks.